4. 1. Now that we have found happiness, why is it so necessary we should find the tree in which it was nesting? Daniel said to me laughingly. For he did not seem to have quite lost the habit of making fun of me once in a while. But, Daniel, you don't seem to understand. Since we haven't been able to find the tree, it means there is still some trial we have to face. Do you mean to say that what we have now is not true happiness? No, I don't mean that, but... Well then, as far as I'm concerned, I would be perfectly content to live all my life with that happiness which you say is not true happiness. Yes, I would too, Daniel, but we have to find the tree. Elga, as long as you won't give up being a little girl, he was starting to say with a mean look which made me lift my head in dread. I'll always be in love with you, he added, leaning over to kiss me. And I laughed too, but all the time I felt a shadow spreading over my happiness. Besides, it was not the only one. The memory of little Andres, still alive everywhere in the house and on the hacienda, constantly brought a touch of sadness into our daily lives. That poor little ghost, so pathetic, so benevolent. We could not help recalling often that it was through his sad death that our own happiness had come into being. Had we forgotten it, the sight of Amanda would very soon have made us recall it. She moved about, pale and silent, only a shadow of that gay, bright young girl who had been more a friend than a servant to me. Clara had left the house. The shock of her little brother's death having affected her mind, her family decided to send her away from the hacienda for a while. Serena, now married, had gone to live in some other part of the country with her good-looking carpenter. Yes, without the sound of Serena's guitar, the house, filled as it was with too many agonizing memories, was sad indeed. Perhaps we should go away for a while and spend some time in the town, Elga. I think it would be pleasant for a change, Daniel suggested one day. Oh, Daniel, I would love it. Yes, that same trip we had made when we were so far apart, so unhappy, we could make it now, hand in hand. Only I warn you in advance that I will under no circumstances see the Countess de Nevers or set foot in her house. Oh, Daniel, Absolutely not, Elga. It's not because I love you that I will stop hating Maria. Anyway, I think it's a good thing for me to hate somebody. Otherwise, being all the time with you, I might easily turn into a chunk of honey. 2. It would be nice also on this trip to pay a little call on Aunt Adelaida, I suggested to Daniel on the train a few days later. He jumped up and faced me with a strange look. Elga, I didn't want to tell you this because, well, we've had too many tragedies, but your Aunt Adelaida died a few weeks ago. She was kind to me in her way, I sighed after a long silence. Her attorney wrote to me asking to call at his office whenever I should come to town. Perhaps the dear old lady has left you something in her will. Oh, I hope it's a letter or some word of farewell. Poor Aunt Adelaida. Daniel gave me one of those looks in which the desire to make fun of me was tempered by some kind of tenderness. We shall soon know all about it, Elga. I promise to go there very soon after we arrive, if ever that miserable train makes up its mind to get to its destination. Look, we're already more than 1 hour late. Mariana was waiting for us at the station. I can still see her as she suddenly appeared before us, pressing through the crowd, neat, smiling, prettier than ever under a mauve sunshade of gauze whirling over her shoulder. Her charm, her fawn-colored eyes, that happy magnetism that radiated from her personality, instantly made me forget my pledge to Daniel. How glad I am to see you, Mariana, I exclaimed, throwing myself in her arms. And yet not a word from you since the night of the ball, Elga. Didn't you ever receive the letter of thanks I sent you? I protested. Daniel must have interceded it. Isn't that so, Daniel? Mariana asked good-naturedly. Of course, Daniel answered with great simplicity. and as I was staring at him, somewhat dazed— "There's no reason to be so surprised, Elga," Mariana resumed. "He has always used that kind of tactics. And you, Bluebeard, give me a kiss anyway. Aren't you glad to see me again?" "Not at all, my dear Maria. And besides, I'm trying to figure out how you discovered that we were coming to town, and what the devil you're doing here anyhow." "The chief steward at the lodge wrote me, among other things, that you were coming. And I'm here to welcome you and to look after your luggage. I don't know if you've noticed that my coachman has already taken your bags." "Good for you, Maria," Daniel acquiesced. "It will save us the price of a cab. Last time it cost me plenty of money." "Oh, Daniel," I exclaimed, greatly shocked. "Leave him alone, Elga. It doesn't matter. Let everyone play his part. His is that of brother miser, and mine is that of sister prodigal." "Home, Jose," Mariana ordered the coachman after we had seated ourselves in the elegant coupe.
"Nothing of the kind. To the Hotel Astoria," Daniel cried.
"One moment, Jose. Do you mean to tell me, Daniel, that you don't intend to stop at my house?" my sister-in-law remarked, looking greatly surprised.
"We'll never set foot in your house again, my dear Maria," was Daniel's answer.
"But you can't do that. Elga, I've gotten everything ready for your visit. And besides, it isn't done. You cannot go to a hotel when my house is at your disposal with several guest rooms. What would people say, Daniel?"
"Perhaps they would say that since your famous ball, Daniel Viana and his wife do not care to visit the Countess de Nevers. That's all."
"That's it exactly, Daniel. You cannot imagine how much gossip there has already been about my ball. People are likely to say— and you know, when people are envious, there's no limit to what they might say. They're likely to say,
for instance, that while your husband was away you led a life that your brother does not approve of."
"Exactly, Daniel. People are always so mean. Why should we give them another opportunity to gossip?"
"Well, you see, my dear, I don't think people are always so mean as you say. And anyway, one does not have to worry about gossip when one has a clear conscience. To the Hotel Astoria, Jose."
"No, Jose. Drive home, please."
"Do what I ask, or I'll take the reins myself," Daniel cried. And as the carriage started to move at last, he turned to his sister and added, "Furthermore, I regret to inform you that neither my wife nor I will do you the honor of setting foot inside your house during our stay in town, Madame la Comtesse."
A silence followed, during which was heard the rumbling of wheels over heavy pavement. And then suddenly the gay, insolent, proud Countess de Nevers, her eyes full of tears, sighed— "But what you're doing to me, Daniel, is mean. It's really very mean."
"I've always been mean, and you know it, just as you've always been a liar."
"Why do you say that?"
"Because I have a premonition," Daniel answered.
"Well, then, I must confess it's true. I lied to you, if you call that lying," suddenly exclaimed Mariana, now weeping copiously. "If I'm so anxious to have you stay with me, it is not on account of what people might say. No, it's on account of my husband, who is now back from Europe and who has been told dreadful things about my ball. People have talked about it as if it had been some sort of terrible scandal, an orgy in the dark. They say that the blowing up of the gaslight had been planned in advance, and that the confusion which followed was so great that my sister-in-law felt outraged and decided to go upstairs in her apartment." "That's ridiculous!" I cried. "Yes, it's ridiculous and a terrible shame, and everything else you might want to call it, yet my husband now hardly speaks to me, and he has even threatened to get our marriage annulled in Rome. And I'm told that it might possibly be done because I've never been able to have a child. Oh my God! And now you're coming to town and going to live in a hotel. He will hear about it, and it will be proof to him that all those monstrous stories and those anonymous letters which are poisoning his mind against me are true. Surely after that he will ask for an annulment."
"Well, that might be the best thing for you. Then at least you will be left with a little money," Daniel retorted.
Money, money! That's all you have in mind when you talk to me.
Do you think because my husband is a foreigner and has a title, that is any reason why I can't be in love with him? You yourself, didn't you twice marry for love girls much poorer than he ever was? Well, I too have a heart and adore my husband. I was the one who ran after him to make him marry me. And if I play around now and spend money, it is simply that I want to forget. Yes, to forget my sorrow, because I've never succeeded in making him love me the way I wanted him to. And I will die. I will die if he ever leaves me. Poor Mariana! In order to cry her heart out, she had pulled back her small veil, and her pretty little turned-up nose, which she was patting with a tiny embroidered handkerchief, was actually as shiny as the nose of a kitten. The tears were running over her face powder, and lying back on the cushions of the carriage, no longer trying for effect, she looked like that little red-headed girl she must have been only a few years ago on that hacienda lost in the mist. "Drive to the Countess's house, José," Daniel suddenly ordered the coachman. "Oh, women, what a nuisance they are anyway," he growled, leaning over the edge of the window to hide his emotion. 3. And that is how it happened that, on that very morning, we made our entrance into Mariana's beautiful house, in far more impressive style, I must say, than we had done on the evening of the ball. I almost failed to recognize the big hall of so many memories, in the well-proportioned square vestibule, with soft carpets, its view of the pink drawing-room now cut off by heavy curtains closely drawn. Up the stairway we went. The landings were decorated with natural plants, and I noticed that, filled with those enormous green ferns obviously brought down from the woods around the lodge, the house seemed to be, like them, pervaded by spring. As soon as Mariana had led us into the same blue bedroom we had occupied on the night of the ball, I could not resist drawing open the silk curtains of one of the windows in order to take a look at the little garden. The little garden was still just like a setting for romance, its 4 cypress trees casting straight to heaven their sombre jet of green, the tiny fountain spreading out its endless watery pearl necklace, and the ivy on the far wall still partly covering the sinister little iron gate opening into the alley. With a sudden uncomfortable shiver, I turned back to give a kiss to Daniel, busy placing the suitcases on the little stools Mariana pointed out to him. "Good for you," she cried. "I don't know what has happened to both of you, but this time you really look like a newlywed couple. Well, now that you have everything you need," she added, taking a last look of inspection around the vast room, "I will leave you with the request that you come down to the pink drawing-room just before noon. That's the time set for luncheon. My husband is the very soul of punctuality. Please don't forget it, Daniel. As for you, Elga, I think it would be well if you made yourself lovely for him. He has heard a lot about you, about your beautiful eyes." And with that in mind, I had gotten myself seated in front of the mirror when a knock was heard at the door. "Come in," I said. The door opened. It was Hinette. "Good morning, Madame Viana." I smiled at her, feeling nevertheless impressed by her smart appearance and that slightly amused look she always put on when talking with me. Then, "How do you like this dress, Hinette? You know, I made it myself. Don't you think it looks a bit... My candor seemed to disarm her, and she came to my assistance. "A bit too severe for Madame, who is very young, of course. Besides, Madame looks well in any dress. She has such a pretty waist and is naturally smart. But now that Madame is in town, she should take advantage of the opportunity to make the rounds of the shops with Madame la Comtesse. Considering that Madame Viana can well afford to do it, she should take better advantage of her figure and her personality," she concluded, giving Daniel an oblique glance, which made him red with anger.
"I'm much obliged to you for your advice," he said to her curtly.
"Don't mention it, monsieur. Hinette remarked, unmoved, after which she turned to me again while Daniel disappeared into the bathroom, banging the door after him. I had come to ask Madame if she had not by mistake taken away the fan of Madame la Comtesse in her suitcase when she left for the country the day after the ball. Madame no doubt remembers the little fan embroidered with pearls, which was lent to her by Madame la Comtesse on the evening of the ball. Oh, yes, but I didn't take it away, I'm sure of that, I exclaimed. We have never been able to find it anywhere after Madame left. Several times I suggested to Madame la Comtesse that she should write to Madame about it, but Madame la Comtesse does not like writing letters. That is a fact. So I beg your pardon for insisting, but wouldn't Madame possibly have some idea what she could have done with the fan during the ball? A picture, terrifying in its clearness and precision, all of a sudden entered my mind. A high mantelpiece, an ancient golden clock under a glass case, and Landa putting down next to it the fan embroidered with pearls. For wherever Madame put down the little fan, that is certainly where it must have been forgotten. Yes, in fact it was alongside the little diligent arrow-shaped balance wheel that so lightly registered every second of my guilt that I had forgotten the fan. But no, that could not be. I shook my head, trying to overcome the uneasiness now spreading its shadow over me. No, it could only be in my dream that I had forgotten the fan there. In reality, I must have dropped it at the time Landa's kiss had made me lose my head, or when I was escaping across the drawing rooms and up the stairs to this room I was now again sharing with Daniel. We have been looking for it in all the drawing rooms, in the stairway, and even in the corridors, Hinette was still explaining, but we did not find it anywhere. Oh, Hinette, it's dreadful, dreadful, I murmured, looking fearfully toward the door of the bathroom, on the threshold of which Daniel suddenly reappeared, half naked, dripping with water.
May I come in, Hinette?
Of course, monsieur is at home. I'm the one who should be going, Hinette answered, hurrying out as she cast an outraged look at the state of undress of monsieur.
Well, well. What did that pest want of you? He inquired laughingly.
Oh, nothing very special.
Just giving you suggestions as to how to make me spend my money, eh? He joked, going back to dressing himself.
That's it, I laughed, pleased with the way the conversation was turning.
You know, Elga, after all, she may not be entirely wrong, that hussy. Why shouldn't you ask Maria to help you order a few dresses for yourself?
Oh, Daniel, how nice you are, how very nice. For such a long time I've been dreaming about a tailored suit of very light green, like the grass in the spring.
Well, order it then.
And also about an afternoon dress of very dark blue, like the sky when it's cold.
Very well, if you can find one that color.
And then I want a pink dress, and another one pearl gray, but most of all, I want a very beautiful ball dress, like the one Mariana lent me, but I want it yellow, of such bright yellow color that I could wear it with a bunch of goldenrods in my hand, and
so that all dressed up that way you could again sleep all night on the sofa instead of dancing. A brief silence followed, then,
Daniel, why did you say that to me? I inquired, greatly surprised.
Because that's exactly what happened to you in Mariana's beautiful dress in the pink drawing room on the night of the first ball.
There came another silence, during which Daniel engaged in an angry battle with his collar button. Then, Listen, Daniel, I said calmly, trying hard to understand. You're telling me now, in effect, that I slept on the sofa in the pink drawing room the entire night of the ball, at the hacienda. However, you assured me that when I came up to knock at your door, just after the lights went out, you opened the door and I slept by your side all night.
I never said you slept by my side all night. All I said was that I opened the door to you when you came up." "Well, then, listen, Elga. I'm willing to confess that I led you on, or rather that I let you get yourself involved during our famous discussion at the hacienda. It amused me very much to watch you getting all mixed up with your own words and reasonings." "I don't understand." "Well, you see, Elga, it's quite true I opened the door to you as I said, but a little later than I had said." "I still don't understand." "Now I'm ready," Daniel announced, this time appearing on the threshold of the bathroom, neatly dressed, his hair carefully groomed. "Do I look beautiful?"
"Very."
"And what's even better, I'm on time. It's not yet 12 o'clock."
"Listen, Daniel, I would like you to explain one thing to me."
"Certainly. Come, and I'll explain it all to you, while we go down to the pink drawing-room. Give me your hand. By the way, you look very lovely in that dress, which was said to be so severe. Come along. And now listen to me carefully. On the night of the ball, that door you see right here, where we're now standing, only when I felt that your punishment had lasted long enough, and after you had stopped knocking, did I make up my mind to open it. Do you follow me?"
"Yes," I nodded, for I could readily picture him, standing at that very spot where we were then, with a devilish smile on his lips, cruelly delaying the moment when he would open the door, while, already discouraged, I had actually ceased knocking.
"But it so happened that when I did open the door, as I am doing now,"
and making the deed fit in with the word, Daniel opened the door, still holding me back by the hand.
"you had disappeared. You were not anywhere to be seen. And so, trying to catch up with you, I walked as far as—"
And continuing to make the deed fit the word, Daniel pulled me across the same corridors I had travelled on that unfortunate night of the ball, when, together with the train of Mariana's beautiful dress, I was miserably dragging the humiliation and the anguish of having been literally locked out by my husband.
"I walked as far as this staircase," Daniel concluded as we reached the stairway where he stopped close to the banister. "It was here that I found Amanda."
"Amanda?"
"Yes. You'll recall that she had helped you to go up the stairs without your seeing her, when the champagne had affected you so much. However, let's not go into that again. So Amanda, who had remained here watching in a motherly way all your comings and goings—"
"Why did she let me go downstairs again?"
"That's what I've never quite understood. However, like every other woman, she placed the responsibility on someone else. In this case, on me."
"You should have opened the door to the señora," she said to me. "The señora is acting in a very strange way. She did not even see me when I helped her go upstairs. And look at her now."
Then, standing next to her, I leaned over the banister to— "My lord, Elga, I must say this is all very beautiful," suddenly exclaimed Daniel, still illustrating his story by deed, and leaning over the banister as he had done on the night of the ball. Placing those enormous ferns in the recesses of the wall, and everything else, was really a very good idea. Look, Elga, when seen from here the house is just like a winter garden, don't you think so?"
"Yes," I answered without looking.
"You know, Elga, it seems quite extraordinary, but this house is exactly the type of house that the little devil of a Maria wanted to own when she was not any higher than my knee. When I'm grown up, she used to say to me, I shall have a house entirely different from that of Uncle Manuel. My house will be gay like a garden. It will have walls covered and light-colored silks, soft carpets like lawns. It will have many lamps, orchids in beautiful vases, a swamp on the third floor, and a tower at the bottom of the cellar, I used to say just to annoy her. And I can assure you that every time I said it she went into a frightful rage."
"Very interesting, Daniel, very amusing. But would you mind explaining to me—"
"Explaining what? Oh, yes, of course. Where was I in that exciting story?"
"At the point where, after Amanda had scolded you, you were standing next to her, leaning over the banister."
"That's it. So I was leaning over the banister, as I am doing now, when— Oh, but look, Elga, I haven't noticed this before. That beautiful green carpet spread over the stairway. Doesn't it look exactly like a strip of real lawn? Come, let's tread upon its beauty before my dear sister forbids me to set my big peasant shoes upon it." And as he was talking, as quick as a flash Daniel lifted me on his shoulders and started to run like a fool down the stairs, in no way disturbed by my frightened cries. "There, here you are safe and sound, madame," he said at last, dropping me down in the middle of the hall. "Now I must locate the orchids. Yes, after the carpet, the orchids. Come, Elga, let's play at finding them." All right, but first tell me," I grumbled imploringly and haltingly, "when you were leaning up there over the banister alongside Amanda, what did you—" "Well, I saw you going down this hall exactly as we are doing now," resumed Daniel, pulling me by the hand behind him. "But as those curtains I am now drawing open were not closed then, as you undoubtedly remember, I could clearly see you from up there entering into that good old pink drawing-room right at this spot and disappearing in this comfortable sofa in which you find yourself seated right now," he concluded, pushing me into that sofa, only too well known, facing the French windows. Notwithstanding my increasing apprehension, I could not help casting an inquiring look all around me. The pink drawing-room! How beautiful it was, and how very pink, even in broad daylight. "Look, Elga, here they are!" Daniel suddenly exclaimed, drawing my attention with a triumphant finger to a vase filled with orchids decorating the low table, placed just in front of the much-talked-of sofa upon which I collapsed. Yes, but afterwards, Daniel, tell me." "Afterwards what?" "What happened after you saw me disappearing into the sofa?" "Well, that's simple. A few minutes later," he continued, "considering that you were not showing any sign of life, Amanda and I, still perched up there on the staircase, came to the conclusion that you had fallen asleep. The dear girl wanted to go downstairs to wake you up and bring you back. But, enraged by the ridiculousness of the situation, I spoke sharply to her and sent her right to bed. Then I walked back to our room with the intention of getting dressed and going downstairs myself. But it is then that... Well, then I suddenly said to myself that, after all, it made no difference at all to me whether you slept down there on the sofa or in the bed by my side, and—" Daniel hesitated, suddenly embarrassed. "And leaving the door of the room unlocked so that I could come in whenever I should wake up, you went to bed and fell asleep," I concluded. "It doesn't seem possible to hide anything from you," he said jokingly, his good humor quickly restored. A silence followed, during which I remained absolutely still, with throat tight, while he was walking from one end of the drawing-room to the other, looking more and more pleased with himself. "But, my dear, it's wonderful. Here is an entire collection of jade fish and white china all over the place. Uncle Manuel this time surely would be green with envy if only he could see it." "But tell me, Daniel," I suddenly said to him, cutting short his exuberance, "why then did you tell me so positively at the hacienda that you had opened the door to me when I knocked? And why did you, with your silences and your half-truths, let me believe that I had slept all night by your side?" "Well, as I told you before, in a way it amused me to see how you were taken in even more than I had hoped, and also how you got mixed up in your own stories and dreams, and above all, because it made me angry to have you say over and over again that I had gone to sleep without caring whether my wife was or was not walking the streets with a lover." "Yes, that's exactly what you did." "Excuse me, Elga. I went to sleep, it is true, but only after I had found out that you were comfortably settled here on this sofa, sheltered from the excitement of the ball. And now, whether you dreamed that you were going away with Landa from this sofa or from our bed upstairs, does it really make any difference?" "Why, of course it does," I answered, trying to laugh, while my heart was pounding to the breaking point. "Because now what proof have we got that I did not, in fact, go out with Landa?" "But what proof have we got that you did go out with Landa?" Daniel replied jestingly after a brief pause. The fan! The fan! A voice was screaming inside me. If it cannot be found here in the house, that fan becomes then the definite proof that I went out with Landa. Well now, Elga, you'll admit that my argument, in fact quite worthy of a lawyer, has successfully brought your little game to an end. And since we're talking about lawyers, in order not to lose the habit of being late at meals, I will now run over to call your Aunt Adelaida's lawyer. I have at least 20 minutes, and— Daniel, I interrupted abruptly, if it turns out that my going out with Landa was not a dream, and I really went out with him, what would you do then? A brief silence followed. Elga, darling, you would not be the same woman you are if you had gone out with Landa, Daniel said at last, taking me in his arms, and I closed my eyes and kept silent while he kissed me, murmuring, I will be back in a little while.
4. He went out. How long did I remain there, motionless, under the spell of the strangest anguish? I do not know. All I know is that, as that very anguish was pushing me unconsciously toward the French windows, now wide open, presently I found myself facing again the 4 cypress trees, the fountain, and the little iron gate hidden there under the ivy on the wall. And so it happened that, spurred by the same subtle anguish, I walked down the steps and, sinking ankle-deep in the grass, went around the fountain and opened the iron gate, which made a dreadful grating sound as it turned on its hinges, exactly as it had on the night of my dream. And just as it had happened in my dreams, the gate opened on a narrow sloping alley, and up the narrow street I went like one walking in her sleep. And once more it happened that the alley led to a square, in which I entered without hesitation. There the massive line of buildings enclosing the square was broken by a tall, rusty iron gate, beyond which lay an abandoned garden, high birch trees, their airy leaves alive in the spring air. And behind the birches, closed, silent, looking as though it would fall down under the weight of honeysuckle and clematis, was the old colonial house in my dream. It was now broad daylight. There was no mist. I had not taken any champagne, and I did not have any feelings or desires except for my husband. Yet unquestionably the house was there. There it was, and my fan had been left inside of it, together with my purity and my sworn allegiance to my husband. There it was, and now I knew my night of love had not been a dream, and I was not the woman Daniel thought I was. I recall it was the surprised expression of some passers-by that finally induced me to tear myself away from that gate, to let go of its bars I was holding tightly gripped, as if with my own 2 hands I wanted to feel its cold, its rust, all of its overwhelming reality. Coming back now across the square, I walked down the alley, pushed open the little iron gate, went around the fountain. Standing on the threshold of the French windows, a man was there, apparently waiting for me. Ah, someone is coming at last. I say, how do you do, Elga? Puzzled, I stared at him for a moment. As I'm quite sure you can be no one but Elga. So much I've heard about those beautiful dark eyes, he added, kissing the hand I held out to him. And all at once I realized that this slim man with grayish hair and a smile full of charm was the Comte de Nevers. 5. Guy de Nevers. How different he was from what I had imagined, this man, so simple, with such exquisite manners, at whose right hand I found myself seated at the table. Looking at his lovely silvery hair, his delicate eagle profile, his smart-looking shoulders, his long, well-groomed hands, I wondered, in the innocence of my 18 years, how a man of 40 could look so young and attractive, and I could not help noticing that even though he was unquestionably well-bred, Daniel alongside him looked like a very handsome but rather heavy giant. Several times I intended to pay you a visit at the hacienda, the Count was saying.
For in addition to the pleasure of meeting you both, I also very much want to see the unusual house you're living in." "Just a piece of bric-a-brac," Mariana exclaimed. "Oh, no," I protested. "A real castle out of a fairy tale." "Neither one nor the other," Daniel broke in, with a look of contempt for both of us. And then, turning to his brother-in-law, "Our Uncle Manuel," he was explaining, "a highly cultured man who in the latter part of his life became tired of people, for which we can hardly blame him, decided to build at the hacienda where he was spending his days a house that would be an adequate setting for all the beautiful things he had purchased in the course of his travels." "Very interesting," the Count murmured. "I'm willing to admit," Daniel continued, that kind of a palace in the middle of the forest, surrounded by mist, might appear to be the creation of an unbalanced mind." "I beg your pardon? Of an artist?" the Count objected. "Do you think so?" Daniel asked, his eyes alight with pleasure. "Well, that's just what I was about to say. Our uncle, who also was our guardian and to whom Maria and I owe practically everything we have, may have been a bit queer, but at the same time he was a very good man and a real artist." "I knew it, but I'm still glad to hear you say so," the Count said, obviously won over by the words of the simple manner of Daniel. "I have known about your uncle a long time, for I too appreciate beautiful things, and in particular I know that he owned some beautiful tapestries and a very important library." "Oh, yes. There are all kinds of illustrated editions, some of them very rare, and a lot of old manuscripts worth a fortune. This library is one of the most interesting I've ever known. A professor from some foreign country, whose name I've forgotten, once said to my uncle, he looks like a German with a little goatee. And you see, he made the trip to the hacienda for one purpose, to do research work day and night in the library. And imagine," concluded Daniel with childish vanity, "it is to me that in a special clause of his will my uncle bequeathed his library." "It's too bad he did not at the same time bequeath you some of his culture, so that you could have used it with the library," Mariana exclaimed mockingly. And while her husband looked at her severely, Daniel's anger was rising. "I'm a simple man, a man from the country, that's true, my dear. But even though I do not have 1/4 of the culture you have had the opportunity to acquire, thanks to Uncle Manuel, yet I never made the mistake of calling his house bric-a-brac." "But if you had so much appreciation of works of art, why don't you take care of them as you should? House, library, and everything else is crumbling away under spider webs since the death of Uncle Manuel," Mariana caustically said to her brother, obviously furious at being humiliated by him in front of her husband. "Oh, Mariana," I put in timidly, "you know that even if Daniel and I devoted our entire life to the house, still the mist would somehow get the best of everything." "Yes," Daniel explained to the Count, giving me a pleasant smile. "My wife means that the dampness there is so frightful that it is actually spoiling everything. Paintings, books, tapestries. Especial care would be necessary to preserve—" "Poor Uncle Manuel," Mariana interrupted. "What a punishment for his avarice, to have to see from the next world all his precious treasures crumbling to dust." "You should be the last person in the world to talk about his avarice, Maria," Daniel retorted with indignation. "Well, let's say I speak of it through spite," she answered frivolously. "Through spite?" "Yes, you must admit it was not very flattering to me to have him leave to you, who are very nice but decidedly not an artist, all the things my husband and I would have been better able to appreciate and to take care of than yourself." "But, Maria, really, you forget he's left you very valuable lands, the best of the woodlands." "Which I would readily exchange for the tapestries, the books, and, in particular, for the Murillo and the 2 Corrots he left you." There was a silence, then, "But, Maria," Daniel insinuated in a low, honeyed voice which made me fearful for her, "you know there is still time to arrange for such an exchange." "What do you mean?" "We might prepare a contract of sale on an exchange basis, in which I would transfer to you the works of art left me by Uncle Manuel against your lodge and its woods, Don't you agree that these I'm better able to appreciate and to take care of than yourself?" Daniel sarcastically queried in turn. "That sounds very interesting," the Count exclaimed. "You might come to the hacienda and make an estimate for yourself of all the things there," Daniel continued, addressing himself to his brother-in-law, "and in the meantime—" "In the meantime, we'll have our coffee in the pink drawing-room," Mariana interrupted, getting up from the table. And a few moments later in the drawing-room I noticed that her hands were shaking as she took hold of the lovely silver tongs to pass the sugar. "No coffee for me, thank you, Mariana," Guy de Nevers said to his wife, then, turning to us, "Will you please excuse me if I have to leave you so soon, as I have letters to send to Europe by mail before 3 o'clock. However, I do hope we can resume this conversation tonight," he added, patting Daniel on the shoulder in a friendly manner as he left. 6. No sooner had her husband drawn back the curtains of the pink drawing-room behind him than Mariana, dropping the tongs she had been holding gracefully in her hand, literally threw herself at her brother like an enraged kitten. "I forbid you to speak to Guy again about the exchange," she cried. "I won't have you steal the lodge from me." "Steal? My dear Maria, it seems to me I've heard you say that works of art have great value. And furthermore, I don't see any reason why you should get yourself in such a state. After all, the lodge is your property, and your husband is too much of a gentleman to dispose of it without your consent." "You're cynical, Daniel, a monster of trickery and deceit. You know perfectly well that if my husband insists on such a deal, I would not wish to oppose him." "And why is that, if you please?" "Because at this time I would not want, under any circumstances, to oppose him openly in that which he loves above all else. Yes, it is books, paintings, and works of art that he has spent all his inheritance. And if he still owns his chateau, it is only because it is classified as a historical monument. Yes, all his money, and mostly all that was derived from the sale of my lands, has gone into his art collections. I don't blame him, but the lodge, I want to keep it. Do you hear, Daniel? Those woods have been in the family for 4 generations, and they're the only title of nobility I possess, so I want to keep them. I want to keep them because—" "Because it happens to be a convenient place for you to receive your lovers?" Daniel interrupted brutally. A silence followed. Then, "What did you say?" Mariana cried, greatly disconcerted. "Just what you've heard," Daniel answered with the greatest calm. There was another silence. Then, Elga, did you hear what your husband has just been saying to me?" Mariana interposed pleadingly. "Oh, don't worry. Not only has she heard it, but, what's more, a few weeks ago she saw a certain carriage going around the lagoon, in the general direction of the lodge." "And what do you mean by that?" "You'll find out about it soon enough. Elga, tell her who was in that carriage you saw going by the lagoon a few weeks ago." "But Daniel, you amaze me. You know very well I thought I had seen a carriage under the willows a few weeks ago, but you explained and proved to me later, beyond question, that the willows being a foot under water, it was quite impossible for me to have seen the carriage there." "Oh, that's another mean trick I played on you in the course of our discussion, Elga. The truth is that it was quite possible for the carriage to have been under the willows at the time you saw it there." "I don't understand." "Listen, Elga. There was a difference of several hours between the time you saw the carriage and the time I made you observe the trees were under water. Isn't that so?" "Yes." "Well, it was during those few hours that the waters of the lagoon happened to rise, until they came up to the willows. That's all." "But how did it happen, and why?" "Because, just at that time, I ordered the locks of a little canal going from the river across the woods down the lagoon to be opened, a canal I had planned and constructed for the very purpose of bringing under water that piece of land on which your dear willows are standing." "But what was the purpose of this canal, and of all that labor?" "If I explained to you in detail that I wanted to make out of that place of land a site for raising beavers, would that mean anything to you?" But please don't look so upset, and now that you can see plainly that after all you didn't have a vision, tell the lady right here once for all who it was you had the privilege of seeing in that carriage near the lagoon. Now, Elga, speak, please.
But you know as well as I do that it was Landa, I said, articulating with the greatest difficulty.
Did you hear that? Daniel cried to Mariana. Landa, your lover, behind whom you were hiding while on your way with him to a honeymoon at the lodge. It's the chief steward, whom you asked to keep your visit secret, who took it upon himself to let it be known everywhere, until finally it reached my ears. And now you're cynical enough to pretend that you were attached to the land because of your family feelings. You should, in the first place, have shown some respect for a house in which your father and mother lived, and right now I don't know what's holding me back from slapping you in the face instead of helping you by my presence here in keeping your husband you do not deserve," Daniel concluded, walking up to his sister with a terrifying look on his face. "It's not true! It's not true!" Mariana cried vehemently. "Are you now going to deny the fact that—" "I have no intention of denying I went to the lodge, Daniel, but it was for the purpose of closing the house that I went there, and I stayed only a few hours. And if I had asked the chief steward not to tell I was there, it's because I was afraid that you would bother me again with your much-talked-about contract." "And Mr. Landa, can you tell me why he went to the lodge?" "At the time, Landa and I were guests at the hacienda of your neighbors, the Mendez. And even though you have managed to break off relations with them, still you must admit they are quite incapable of getting involved in anything that might be considered at all improper." "I don't care about the Mendez, but can you tell me what Mr. Landa was doing in the lodge with you?" "Listen, Daniel," Mariana exclaimed in a frenzy. "Landa is not my lover, do you hear? Landa made that long trip in the carriage from the Mendez's hacienda to the lodge just to help you close the shutters and put up the rugs in the house? Is that what you mean?" There was a brief silence, then, "Life is very strange," Mariana sighed, and, having suddenly recovered her good humor, she looked at her brother, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "If I told you the reason why Landa wanted to make that journey with me to the lodge, you would be surprised indeed." "Well, tell us about it anyway, and if it does surprise me, I will consider it most extraordinary," Daniel answered in a cold, sarcastic tone. "Well then, my dear, just imagine Landa, whom you're accusing of being my lover, went to the lodge only with the secret hope of seeing, even from far off, your wife." "My wife?" "Now come, there's no use in taking it so tragically," Mariana said laughingly. "David Landa is too well known an admirer of beautiful women. His devotion to Elga should in no way be considered compromising or dangerous. But what's happening to you? Why do you both look at me like that?" "David? Did you say David Landa?" Daniel was asking. "Why, certainly. Landa's name is David. Do you mean to say you didn't know it?" "Landa's name is David," I repeated like an echo. Again there was a brief silence, then, "My God, of course! I had entirely forgotten!" Mariana exclaimed, looking as though she had suddenly remembered something extraordinarily amusing. "Yes, how odd, Daniel! I had entirely forgotten that Landa also had been a passionate admirer of your first wife, of that beautiful Teresa who is still talked about in society. They even say he was very much in love with her, and that the only reason he did not marry her was because marriage is not his hobby," she concluded with a heavy laugh. "Stop laughing," Daniel mumbled in a hollow voice. "How can I help it? You and David Landa, rivals! That's so unexpected, so absurd." "Don't laugh," Daniel cried, grabbing his sister violently by the shoulder. "When I think that you, my own sister, brought to the hacienda and introduced to my wife this man, the only man of whom I cannot even bear the thought that he spoke to her and touched her hand." "But Daniel, I don't see why you— Oh my God, Elga! What's the matter with her?" "Elga!" And now Daniel and Mariana were rushing to my aid, for,
and even after so many years I hate to tell about it because I think it is so very ridiculous. I had just fainted. If my reader will, however, consider all that I had gone through since my arrival at Mariana's house, perhaps he will forgive me for acting in such a silly way. One by one, all the elements which I had believed made up no more than a guilty dream had reappeared clothed in an inescapable reality, and gathered together in what seemed to me implacable logic. There they were now confronting me in the shape of a truth that could no longer be denied. My running away with Landa had not been a dream. Landa unquestionably had been my lover. And furthermore, oh height of misfortune, it turned out that Landa was David. David Landa, the man who was responsible for Daniel's losing his youth and his faith, the one man with whom, even if he wished to, Daniel could never forgive me my fault. David Landa. The shame of having belonged to him was hurting Daniel so cruelly through me that I never would dare look at him in the face. So all was now lost for me. Happiness, indeed, was gone forever. 7. If I had ever dared to present this simple account of a woman's experience in the form of a novel, I would have called the chapter that is to come "The Ball in Reverse." Although it records an extraordinary and complete turn in events, it begins, nevertheless, in such a simple manner that it might easily be considered a quite unnecessary sequence to the scene which had just unfolded itself in the pink drawing-room. It was on that much-talked-about sofa facing the French windows that I found myself lying down when I regained consciousness. My fainting spell must have been neither very long nor very terrible, considering that my eyes were not yet opened when already Mariana was resuming her discussion with Daniel. "Really, you two, for people who profess to be so simple, I find you both entirely too complicated. And anyway, Daniel, I don't see why you should be so outraged because Elga shakes hands with a man whose only crime is to have been in love with Teresa before she was even engaged to you." "Oh, Mariana, please, not another word. You don't know," I murmured. "And as for you, my dear," she continued, turning to me, "you're acting as if you were the adulterous woman in the Gospels. For, after all, I don't see any crime in having made yourself attractive to a man as fascinating as Landa, in having smiled at him and shown him you like to dance with him." "As for you," quickly put in Daniel, "you wouldn't even think it a crime if she'd gone away with him, stayed out all night, and returned only in the early morning." "Why do you say that to me?" Mariana inquired nervously. "Because it's exactly what I saw you do on the night of the ball," Daniel replied very calmly. "It's not true," Mariana cried, a terrified look in her eyes. "My dear Maria," Daniel retorted, "when a woman does what you did on the night of the ball, she should not go about talking so loudly under her brother's windows, and she should not choose to run away in a dress spangled with thousands of stars that seemed to cry out in the night, 'Here we are! Here we are now going through the garden. Here we are now going through the little iron gate.'" A silence followed. Then, "Well, all right. It's true. It's true I went out with Landa that evening," Mariana admitted at last in a low, trembling voice. "Do you understand now, Elga, why I felt so sure that what you were telling me could not be anything but a dream?" Daniel said to me. Then, coming back to the sofa where I was lying dumbfounded, unable to utter a single word. "You saw me going out with Landa, it's true, Daniel," Mariana exclaimed. "But would you be good enough to tell me if it's your intentions to go on shouting it on the rooftops?" Poor Mariana, she was still trying to bluff, yet she looked so pale and seemed so unhappy that Daniel took pity on her. "No, Maria, I won't, unless you again drive me crazy with your impertinence." "Oh, Daniel, Daniel, if only you knew," she suddenly moaned. "Well, I guess I know quite enough as it is," he growled. "Very well, Daniel," I spoke out at last, "but I would like you to explain to me, in fact, you must explain to me how and when you saw Mariana go out with Landa for a walk on the evening of the ball. I added forcefully, notwithstanding the pity I felt for Mariana, who was now seated curled up in one of the armchairs, sobbing heavily, just like the little red-haired girl I had seen crying in the carriage. "Well, after all, Elga, it would seem I owe you this explanation, and your sister-in-law should not be any the worse for it. A little while ago I told you that I was leaning over the banister on the stairway. After I had noticed you had fallen asleep on that same sofa where you're lying now, I went back to our room." "Yes, I know. You intended to get dressed and come down for me, but as I was starting to dress, the terribly indiscreet grating sound of the little iron gate, together with the well-known voice of my dear sister almost shouting, 'Landa, are you leaving?' brought me to the window, which, unfortunately for everyone concerned, opened on the garden, just in time to hear our dear Mr. Landa's answer, 'No, I'm not leaving, I'm running away.'" I gave a start. Mariana abruptly stopped crying and kept staring at her brother, who, holding her gaze, continued in a strange voice, "Does it mean I shall never see you again?" A breathless silence followed. Then Mariana spoke. "You're the one who wished it that way, so good-bye." "Did you also hear the other answer of Landa's?" she said at last, weighing on each word. "And do you know what it meant, my dear brother?" "Yes. It meant that up to that point, anyway, you had retained some semblance of decency, though it was quickly lost, it would seem, judging from the little dialogue that followed." "No, no, stay, Landa. I want you to stay." "But why?" "Because I love you," Daniel recited with emphasis. I could not possibly have said it with so much feeling, considering that what he actually answered was, "You mean to say you love me this evening?" Mariana in a pitiful voice was attempting to jest. "At any rate, you made up later for your indifference, and he for his caution," Daniel retorted, and then, "Yes, that it's only this evening, but this evening, however, I do love you passionately." "Why? Is it because your husband has forsaken you?" he recited again, while Mariana sobbed out, "But it's true, my husband had hurt my feelings terribly when he left so suddenly for Europe, and insisted on going away all by himself." "Did that give you an excuse, on account of spite, to become the plaything of a worthless man?" Daniel interrupted harshly. "The plaything? That's too much." "My poor Maria, it seems to me I can still hear him saying to you, 'Then prove to me that you love me.' And you, as meek as a lamb, answering, 'But how?'" Oh, dear reader, I know, in fact I'm sure, that at this point in my story the light which gradually had come to my understanding, as the brother and sister were thus battling with words, had also at the same time entered your mind. All through their discussion, and sentence by sentence, I had recognized every word of the same intimate conversation I had thought I had had with Landa prior to my presumed departure with him on the night of the ball. And I realized, now that the same grating sound of the iron gate, which had brought Daniel to the window, had at the same time partly awakened me as I was lying on the sofa, and that in my semi-conscious state I had appropriated to myself the dialogue which Mariana, unaware of my presence, had so recklessly carried on with Landa. By the same token, I understood clearly that it was quite understandable that it should be so, considering that every single word of the dialogue could just as well have been spoken between Landa and myself. For Mariana was speaking the thoughts that were actually in my mind, and Landa was proposing to her what, in my madness of the moment, I secretly desired to hear. "Come with me tonight." "What are you saying?" "I will bring you back before dawn. Nobody will notice your absence. Certainly not your husband." "But that's sheer madness." "Come. Then you will hold the memory of what real love is. It will help you to bear life at the side of a man who doesn't love you." "He will love me." Daniel was actually continuing to recite in the same somber, sarcastic voice. "He will love me," was your answer, Maria, to that wretch,
admitting that your husband does not love you, and giving that blackguard enough encouragement to speak once more insolently. "He will never love you," he said to you. "Besides, he's not worthy of you, and everybody knows the reason why he married you." And you, usually so proud, did not even rebel, but remained there sighing, "Oh, you're cruel." "Everybody seems to think," Mariana protested, "and you among the first, that Guy would never have married me if it had not been for the millions of Uncle Manuel, and as he has been so indifferent to me, I've often come to think the same myself." "Maria, the whole world and I, too, might well be wrong, you know," Daniel said. "And as for you, who know so much about flirting, I'm surprised you didn't hide from that fellow a thought so humiliating to you." "I was far too unhappy at the time to think of being a flirt, you may be sure." "That was not Mr. Landa's opinion. Do you remember the reproaches he made to you then? 'You've been more cruel to me, many times. You made me lose my head. You lied to me.' And even though you protested, he gave himself the satisfaction of speaking the truth to your face. I can still hear him. 'Yes, with your eyes and in your manner you lied to me, ever since that first day, and still you believe yourself honest.'" "Stop it!" Mariana cried. "Yes, it's with that same conviction that you cried, 'Stop it!' to that dear Landa, and yet he was hastening to obey you." "Very well, then, not another word. I'm going." You rushed behind him, crying with no less conviction, "No, no, I'm going with you. Until daybreak. My love," Daniel concluded, giving his sister a terrifying look. She lowered her head. "My God, Daniel, you certainly have a wonderful memory," Mariana murmured, caught halfway between tears and laughter. "That may be, but I can assure you that I didn't require wonderful eyesight to see you shooting fireworks across the garden in that dress, scintillating with stars, and to see you going off on the arm of that despicable fellow through the iron gate." "Yet I love my husband, Daniel. I can't imagine what happened to me that night." And for the 100th time Mariana broke out decisively in a flood of tears. And so, dear reader, that was the way it all had happened. And now I could understand how, as soon as Mariana had run away with Landa, I had immediately dropped back into sleep and gone away with him too, but in my dream. I mean, it was in my dream that I had carried on that mad adventure, a burning desire for which his kiss had aroused in my flesh 1 hour earlier in the ballroom. Daniel went on relentlessly. "You went away, and there I stood, like an idiot, and that is what I'll never forgive you, Maria. That ridiculous night you made me go through. For what was I to do? Run after you and beat up the fellow? Or else beat you up yourself? Start a scandal? If ever I had made up my mind to go downstairs, that's just what I would have done. But to start a scandal would have made your shame irretrievable, public. And so I stayed there, worrying myself sick, walking up and down, even sleeping at times, until once again the grating sound of the damn gate announced your return. Pitiful, ridiculous. That's the way I felt. Yet I don't see what else I could have done under the circumstances." And so, on Mariana's return, it was again the little iron gate, with its grating sound, that had so logically brought my dream to an end. And while she was taking leave of her guests, just as if nothing had happened, I, believing that I had just come back from my lover's house, had gotten up from the sofa, walked up the main stairway, and returned to my room where Daniel— "I was pretending to be asleep when you came in, Elga, but I can assure you that from the moment you closed your eyes, a new torture was added to all those I had suffered that night. Had you from your sofa heard and seen all I had seen and heard myself? You did not act as if you had, but perhaps it was because you had decided to keep silent and protect Maria. Only 1 month later, When you told me that Landa had been your lover, I realized at last that all that going back and forth of that unfortunate creature had not awakened you completely, and that in some way you had managed from her woeful adventure to build for yourself a new kind of dream to add to your collection." "What's that? What do you mean? What are you talking about?" suddenly inquired Mariana, her curiosity having gotten the better of her tears.
"About a lot of things you'll never know," Daniel retorted. "And besides, I think it's high time I should be permitted to get a little rest from the pleasure of your company, Maria. So, Elga, please tear yourself away from that miserable sofa and come with me." Just then my right hand, which had slipped between the cushions and the back of the sofa, as it might have done while I was lying there on the evening of the ball, struck against an object which my fingers took hold of, raised. And behold, I got up, holding in my hands a small heavy fan, which I instantly opened. "My embroidered fan!" Mariana exclaimed. "Yes, that fan embroidered with pearls, which I must have dropped while I was asleep on the sofa the night of the ball," I cried in a transport of joy. For, heaven be praised, this dreadful reality I had seen slowly rising out of the mist of my dreams was now crumbling piece by piece, and going back forever into the mist. For it was unquestionably true that I had not spent the night alongside of Daniel on the evening of the ball, yet, thank God, it was Mariana, not I, who had run away with Landa. And I had actually seen the carriage on the bank of the lagoon, but it didn't matter in the least now whether I had seen it or not, or whether Landa had been in the carriage, considering that he had never been my lover. And for the fan, it had slipped off my wrist and buried itself between the cushions and the back of the sofa, while I was sleeping there on the night of the ball. No, I had not forgotten it next to that little clock on the mantelpiece of that house in which— I gave a start, a horrible vision having brutally come to cut short the effervescent course of my joy.
"Elga, where are you going?"
"Elga? What's happening to her? Where is she running?"
"Elga! Elga, wait for me!"
But already I was gone. I had slipped down into the garden, past the fountain, and opened the little iron gate. 8. And now going up the little alley, with Daniel running close behind me, I already had reached the square, gone across it, and was there pressing once more against the bars of that gate only too well known. In order that my flight with Landa should have been only a dream, this house I could see behind the birch trees, this house so charming and so very real under the weight of the honeysuckle, should disappear, vanish in the spring air like a house of mist.
"Elga, what are you trying to do? Why did you come here?"
"Daniel, that house— for there is a house there behind the birches, isn't there?"
"Why, of course."
"Well, then, that house— I know it. I have been inside of it, Daniel."
"Yes, I know you have, Elga. But why are you crying? Come, come," he said, suddenly pushing open the gate. "Let's go in."
"No."
"But you must, Elga. You shouldn't be afraid of memories."
And taking me by the hand, Daniel dragged me across the lawn and through the birch trees, up to the very door of the house, where I stopped faltering. Then, under the pressure of my body, the old door gave way and opened. I can still hear the frightened cry I uttered as I fell back.
"My poor Elga, don't be afraid. I'm the one who left the door open when I came here a little while ago."
"You?"
"Yes, and it's on account of this door that I arrived late, almost in the middle of lunch, notwithstanding Maria's instructions. The poor lawyer and I had to put in so much time and energy to force it open. But do go in, Elga. Go into your house."
"No, no," I cried. "I don't know what kind of trick you are trying to play on me this time, Daniel, but I can assure you that if you don't explain everything clearly, I will go mad, right here and now."
"Elga, my lord, what's happening to you? Control yourself, I beg of you. I had no idea of hurting you, you may be sure.
I only thought that since you had recognized the house, you were going, little by little, to guess everything else." "What? To guess what?" "Well, that this is the house in which you were born, and that you lived the first 5 years of your life, this house in which your parents died, and which is the only thing in the world they could have left you, was generously bequeathed to you in her will by your most conscientious Aunt Adelaida." "This house?" "Yes. Are you afraid to go in now?" I shook my head, and taking hold nervously of the arm Daniel was gently offering me, I stepped across the threshold. So sure was I that I was about to enter the shadow of a closed house that I remained speechless with astonishment as Daniel proceeded to explain to me, in the manner of a discontented owner, "Yes, it seems that the roof crumbled about 10 years ago at the time of the great earthquake. The walls and the foundations, however, have stood up very well." Yes, it had the sky for a roof, my house. A celestial and radiant roof that suddenly seemed to pour out all of its light into the most rudimentary, the darkest recess of my memory. The garden, that garden through which I had just come, turning around to look at it from the threshold, I suddenly discovered it again in my memory, but full of tall trees, sparkling with fountains, and interspersed with wisteria-laden arbors. I was seeing it again as the big park it had been before the expanding city, with its tall waves of masonry, had closed in on it, reducing it to this miserable grass plot strewn with a few lean birch trees. And that is how I could see, resting there under the blue shade of the mauve-colored wisteria, a young woman, working at her embroidery with a little girl standing by her side. "Were you calling me, Mummy?" "Yes, Elga, darling. My thimble has just fallen to the ground." And the little girl is kneeling down, is looking around, searching the grass a long while. "Oh, Mummy, I don't see it. I can't find that pretty little gold thimble of yours." "Well now, Elga, perhaps Thumbelina has seen it first and picked it up." "Thumbelina?" "You know, that tiny little girl born in a tulip, whose story is told in one of the books I gave you. Do you recall? That little girl so small that she uses a walnut shell as a cradle, blue-violet leaves as a mattress, and rose leaves for her coverlet. Don't you remember?" "Oh, yes, yes, Thumbelina. She lives in a garden, feeds on the honey from the flowers like the bees, and— But tell me, Mummy, why should she have stolen your pretty thimble, that little Thumbelina?" "Oh, Elga, who knows? Perhaps she wanted to have a lovely little bathtub made of gold. That's it, 2 or 3 dewdrops in the thimble and—" The grating sound of a distant gate interrupts this talk, and the little girl runs toward the young man who has just appeared out there at the end of the path. That young man is the same one whose portrait I have, my father. He is tall, elegant, and slender. He has blue eyes, and, notwithstanding his extreme youth, his hair is gray. Yes, his hair of bluish gray, bringing out his youth, and fine features, is a real miracle, such as could hardly be discerned in his portrait. Enrique del Rio. I could see him now, lifting up high in his arms and kissing that little girl, who was I. I could see him putting her down and coming forward with a smile to the perfumed shade of the arbor. And his beloved, so appealing, I could see her raising herself up on the settee, her heavy locks falling half undone on the frail nape of her neck, her pale complexion suddenly alight like a rose, all pink, 2 small golden flames suddenly dancing in the depths of her dark pupils. And the handsome young man, I could clearly hear his voice as he addresses her, tenderly bending down to meet her lips. His was a deep voice, trembling just a little, and it seemed to caress that forehead raised up to him, as softly as would the wings of one of those butterflies fluttering among the flowers of the wisteria. "It's already cool here under the arbor. That's not the best thing for you, Ebba. Let's go inside." And I could see myself proudly carrying my mother's scarf and her work-bag,
following behind the lovers up to the threshold where I was now back again after so many years standing at Daniel's side. For this garden was in fact the garden of my earliest childhood. It was the park of Ebba Hansen's villa. The park only a few steps away from Mariana's house that Landa had told me about during the ball, and the walls of which he had climbed to look at my mother through the trees. And now I understood that it was because his words had unconsciously driven my mind to look for that park in my memory that, while I was asleep on the sofa in the pink drawing-room, it was to this very park that I had come in my dream. And behold, I could see myself again, a very little girl, running through the same suite of rooms through which I had passed with Landa in my dream, and through which I was now walking, followed by Daniel. This large room with cracked walls, along which frolicsome little lizards were now sliding, I could see it all, decorated with green garnet-colored brocade. And once more I could see Ebba Hansen, sitting at the far end of the room behind a long piano, and I could hear her singing. Oh, that small, gentle voice, high-pitched, melodious, and tender, the dim sound of velvet notes, with which at the piano she accompanies her soft crystalline sighing, wherein the words spring and love, nostalgia and farewell keep coming back over and over again. I understood at last, after so many years, that this had been the source of that melancholy yet peaceful chant, which so often came up within me whenever I found myself alone or in a pensive mood. 2 rooms, a corridor, and then another room. Ebba Hansen. I was finding her once more kneeling on the carpet of that other room now laid bare. And behold, I was again seeing her pale little hand, for so many years now motionless and cold, busily engaged putting together the pieces of a large puzzle, my last toy. And from the depth of my childhood was coming up to my ear her lovely bird-like voice, describing the scenery which she was in the act of recreating as much for her own pleasure as for that of her child. There, this piece here shaped like a clover leaf, and this beautiful pine tree all covered with frost, is now complete. And then, let's see, this piece is surely a part of that bridge over that frozen river, all white with snow. And, oh, Enrique, what a good idea you had to bring this present to the little one, for this snow scene is a true picture of winter in my country. Look, Elga, in your mother's country the snow does not only fall on the mountain tops, it also falls as it does in this picture, over the woods, over the roofs of houses, and over everything until it forms the beautiful white carpet that you see here. Oh, tell me, Mummy, the snow, is it very cold? Yes, Elga, very, very cold. But is it hard? Tell me, Mummy, and how does it taste? If I should take a bite out of one of those snowballs the little boys are fighting each other with, what would happen to me? Oh, Mummy, and that pretty little animal there, what is it? It's a squirrel. A squirrel? And what does it do? It plays. It enjoys itself running here and there in the snow. Is that all? Yes. God has made it only for that purpose, you see. Only that it might play and enjoy all that is beautiful in the forest, everything that men do not understand or do not want to see, the iridescent reflection of the morning on each dewdrop, mushrooms of unexpected colors that come up under the wet shadow of the ferns, and also that it might enjoy each one of the seasons, and in each season every incident of the marching day, a brief spell of mist, a sudden burst of sun, a gentle breath of wind, and the strong, deep perfume that comes out of flowers when rain is about to fall. But at night, Mummy? At night, what does it do, the little squirrel? It climbs to the very top of the pine tree, where it nestles and keeps still, enjoying every second of moonlight, following the phosphorescent track of every shooting star. Oh, Elga, Don't you see it is because of this little squirrel that so many lovely things are not lost, have not been given out in vain by God? But, Mummy, are there not people who also live only to see those lovely little things? There are some, Elga. They are the poets, the artists, the true ones, those who with sounds, words, or colors love to create worlds, where it is pleasant for the human mind to descend and to dwell. Isn't that so, Enrique? And once again I could see my father looking at Ebba Hansen, making no answer, looking at her a long time, fixedly, deeply, as if he had never seen her before, or as if he was endeavoring to reach through her one of those worlds she had just described to us. "Now, Elga, come back, come back!" It was Daniel's voice calling me back to the present, and somewhat impatiently warning me that it was high time for us to continue our landlord's tour of inspection. One last door, and we find ourselves in a large room absolutely bare, its walls badly battered by the years and the storms. In the background, a high mantelpiece falling apart. And behold, as my memory went back to my recovered childhood, I could see that same room entirely done in lovely chintz of faded colors, illumined by the pink light of a big fire dancing in the high chimney. In the middle of the room, a large bed with tulle curtains, and in the bed a young woman asleep. Her beautiful dark hair was spread out on the pillows, and her long eyelashes were resting very still on her pale cheekbones. While sitting at the bedside and holding her hand, a young man was watching over her sleep. All seemed so peaceful, and both looked beautiful, young, earnest, and unhappy. Ebba Hansen and my father. And even to the little girl I was then, they appeared as the very image of love. For 13 years later, it was in this room, their own room, that I had come back in my dream to live with Landa, what I had thought at the time the biggest love moment in my entire life. And behold, in my memory, there I was suddenly living again the moment so long ago in my childhood, when, after having watched the beautiful, silent couple, the very little girl I was then walked across the room to take a look at the clock on the mantelpiece. And I could see myself there on tiptoe, staring in joyful amazement at the arrow-shaped pendulum moving back and forth. And it was at the side of that clock, so admired by me as a child, that I had laid down 13 years later in a dream, that other plaything of my first ball, Mariana's beautiful fan. 9. Yes, my flight with Landa was nothing more than a dream, and that other house built by my subconscious self in a night of madness, out of memories, desires, and mist, was now going back and crumbling down again into the mist. Happiness! I did not dare yet give myself over into the joy of having at last recovered it, when, "Elga! Elga!" Daniel was calling to me from outside. As he had at last succeeded in opening the door at the other end of the room, he must be calling me now from that classical inner patio upon which all the rooms in our colonial houses converge. "Come, Elga, come quickly!" His voice was insisting. And as I walked toward the door, on my way to him, a breath of perfume and a sort of musical humming came forth to meet me. "Look, Elga, isn't this the tree of your dreams?" I raised my eyes and remained speechless, overwhelmed. For, oh miracle, it was my tree, this gigantic mimosa, standing there in the midst of crumbling walls, still shedding its perfume on the spring day in Ebba Hansen's patio. Yes, it was the tree of happiness, this blossoming golden tree, swarming with bees, under which Daniel was now enticing me with a tender, mocking smile, while whispering to me, as is usual at the end of all old-time love stories, "I love you." Captain's Cottage, Rockport, Maine.
Thank you for listening to this unabridged audiobook recording of House of Mist by Maria Luisa Bombal. This was Abigail Kosnik.